Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to the roaring 20s, not to the lavish parties or flapper balls just yet, but to the quieter, cozier moments where free time actually happened. Picture yourself on a wooden porch, the kind with a slightly uneven floor that creaks under every shift of your weight. The swing sways gently as you nurse a sweating glass of lemonade, its tartness cutting through the late summer heat. In the distance, a lawnmower sputters to life. Somewhere nearby, children squeal as they chase a hoop with a stick like it's the Olympic torch. This was leisure for many Americans. It wasn't all jazz clubs and speakeasies. It was neighborhood chats, front yard croquet, and some seriously competitive lemonade stands. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where are you listening from, and what time is it right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You hear the gentle clink of ice against glass, the slow rhythm of the porch swing's rusty chain. It's the early 1922nd, and electricity is still a novelty in many homes, which means your evenings are dim, candlelit, and delightfully slow. Neighbors pass by and shout greetings. Some of them stop to chat. You know, actual face-to-face talking. Imagine the horror. In towns across the country, backyards transformed into gathering spots. People didn't fly to Cozumel or binge-watch anything. They played lawn games, croquet, horseshoes, or the strange little game of graces, where players tossed wooden hoops using sticks. It sounds easy until you try it after your third slice of rhubarb pie. And let's not forget the great American lemonade stand. While it's easy to romanticize it now, those little folding tables and hand-lettered signs were real neighborhood fixtures. Kids would set up shop on corners, offering cups for a nickel and learning the fine art of upselling with a cookie add-on. Some even undercut each other's prices in the first documented signs of capitalist warfare among 8-year-olds. Porches were the original Facebook. You sat, you observed, you judged the neighbors, and occasionally shared unsolicited opinions. Rocking chairs creaked like old bones. Someone might break out a harmonica. And if the local gossip had extra spice, say, a traveling salesman seen twice at Widow Parker's, you leaned in closer. Meanwhile, gardens weren't just for vegetables. Backyard space often doubled as tiny leisure retreats. Hammocks swung between trees. Folding chairs faced the fireflies. People would read aloud to each other from newspapers or novels, especially serialized ones that kept listeners hanging like the last 10 seconds of a Netflix show. And let's talk about Sunday afternoons. It was practically illegal to do anything productive. Instead, families would gather in their best, lazy outfits, which still included stiff collars and scratchy wool, and lounge around. Maybe a family band would stumble through a few songs. Maybe a dog would catch a frisbee, or a toddler would eat mud. It was all entertainment. One quirky footnote: lawn flamingos? Not a thing yet. But garden gnomes? Oh yes. Imported from Europe, these little ceramic weirdos lurked in flower beds, and sometimes, if positioned right, caused actual startles after sundown. Historians still argue whether the popularity of home-based leisure was out of necessity or preference. After all, World War I had just ended. Many Americans were cautious, economically, emotionally, and socially. The idea of enjoying simple things felt safe, familiar, healing. Some families hosted porch readings, where a designated voice, often the oldest teenager, who resented every minute read from the Bible, adventure stories, or etiquette manuals. You learned, for example, that it was improper to lick your knife or mention indigestion at the table. These were considered refined topics, and somehow were spoken of with the same gravity as international diplomacy. Now picture twilight settling in. The sky is a warm purple. Someone lights a mosquito coil. A neighbor drops off leftover cobbler in a tin you probably won't return. There's no rush, no alerts, no dings. The only thing buzzing is a sleepy June bug, and maybe, if you're lucky, a bit of gentle gossip. Mrs. Simmons saw a woman walking alone with her hair down. Scandal. The irony? In this time of relative stillness, the country was quietly preparing to leap into its most chaotic decade. But here, in the fading light, As your swing creaks and the lemonade goes warm, there's peace, laughter, maybe even the occasional fart from Grandpa Harold who thinks no one hears. And with that, you set your empty glass aside. The porch grows quiet. Somewhere, a harmonica plays a wobbly tune, and in the stillness, you realize this was their version of fun. No screens, no apps, just stories, swings, and a sky big enough for all your yawns. The lemonade's gone, but now you're lured by the scent of hot peanuts, buttered popcorn, and the strange mix of sea air and sweat that defines America's playground, Coney Island. You shuffle forward with a crowd that's both giddy and slightly sunburned. It's the 1922nd, and amusement parks are more than cotton candy and carousel rides, they're cultural explosions in motion. Coney Island, in particular, isn't just an entertainment destination. It's the spot where modern American leisure is being rewritten in blinking lights, mechanical screams, and entirely too many pickpockets. As you walk beneath a banner that reads, Dreamland, your shoes stick slightly to the planks, soda, sunscreen, and spilled dreams. People shriek from above as the Thunderbolt coaster rattles by, its wood frame groaning with the weight of steel and thrill seekers. You pass barker after barker, each promising a miracle of modern invention, or a glimpse at the world's smallest woman, weighing less than a ham. The 1922nd marked the rise of large-scale, mechanized fun. Places like Luna Park and Dreamland were jam-packed with freak shows, acrobats, trained elephants, and rides that had no safety regulations, zero. Historians still argue whether these early amusement parks were meant more for escapism or profit, but either way, you got a face full of wind, wonder, and sugar. One mainstream fact that pops up like a whack-a-mole: this was the first time many working-class Americans had access to large-scale recreation. As wages stabilized after the war and the work week shortened, hello, 40-hour standard, people finally had free time and a bit of money to burn. So they came. They came by ferry, by elevated rail, by streetcar. Entire families packed baskets of boiled eggs and jam sandwiches and staked out picnic plots between attractions. Some brought blankets to nap between roller coasters. Yes, people once rested during amusement park visits. Shocking, isn't it? And of course, there was the beach. Coney Island's shoreline buzzed with bodies in modest wool bathing suits that soaked up water like kitchen sponges. Women wore swim dresses with bloomers. Men, tank tops and shorts that ended mid-thigh. Modesty was law, but so were tan lines and sand in deeply uncomfortable places. The fringe tidbit? Human zoos. Yep. For a short but troubling period, some amusement parks featured so-called ethnographic villages, where indigenous people from colonized nations were put on display. It was exploitation dressed up as education, and while it drew crowds, it remains one of the more shameful footnotes in the era's leisure history. Let's not romanticize everything, right? Still, the bulk of it was joyfully chaotic. Children begged for candy sticks and taffy. Couples snuck kisses in the haunted house. Somewhere, a strongman juggled dumbbells, while a woman in sequins juggled flaming batons. Overhead, dirigibles buzzed giant floating blimps that sometimes offered panoramic rides if you had a strong stomach and an even stronger life insurance policy. There's a live orchestra playing ragtime near the boardwalk. You stop and listen as a man with a waxed moustache plucks a banjo with enviable energy. A girl in a sailor dress cartwheels beside a cotton candy stand. And, in one of the sideshow tents, a man with a tattooed face recites Shakespeare while walking barefoot on glass. Truly, a renaissance of ridiculousness. By sunset, the park transforms. Gas lamps flicker on, casting golden halos over the midway. The sounds grow louder, more theatrical. You pass a woman guessing weights, a bearded lady giving dating advice, and a monkey wearing suspenders, probably unpaid. Somewhere nearby, a couple elopes after winning a stuffed bear the size of a small refrigerator. People didn't just come for the rides, they came to feel alive. After the darkness of war and the flu pandemic, Coney Island and other parks became the physical manifestation of relief, of motion, of noisy, unapologetic joy. And all for 10 cents admission. One lesser-known fact: some parks offered early baby incubator exhibits. Premature infants, often born to poor families, were placed in early incubator machines as part of a live display, part medical demonstration, part moral fundraising. Strange? Yes. Life-saving? Also yes. Some of those babies survived only because their care was funded by gawking park-goers tossing coins in a jar. You wander back toward the exit now, your arms sticky with salt and sugar. The crowd begins to thin. Somewhere, a ride breaks down and erupts into cheers. A fortune teller wraps up her final reading, muttering something about tall strangers and dark secrets. You sigh. You're full. Not just with fried food, but with motion, sound, spectacle. This was what fun looked like when Americans were first learning how to laugh again in public. And as you step off the boardwalk and the noise fades behind you, you realize just like those coasters, they wanted thrills. But they also wanted control. A predictable loop. A safe, kind of scary. A place where, even if you screamed, you always came back to solid ground. Now you're slipping into a cool, darkened theatre. The smell hits first stale popcorn, wood polish, and the faint tang of cigarette smoke on wool coats. You ease into a creaky velvet seat, surrounded by strangers, none of whom are speaking. Why? Because the movie hasn't started yet, and also, it's silent. It's the golden age of silent films, and tonight's feature stars a familiar face. Charlie Chaplin, cane in hand, mustache twitching. The organist leans into the keys just as the screen flickers to life. A piano plinks out a jaunty melody to match every pratfall, wink, and chase across the screen. No dialogue, just black and white magic punctuated by slide cards that say things like "Gadzooks" and "You scoundrel." In the 1922nd, going to the movies wasn't just entertainment, it was a ritual. Nickelodeons, named because they cost a nickel, became ubiquitous in small towns and big cities alike. For 5 cents, you could escape your life for a reel or two, with newsreels, cartoons, and a short drama or comedy all packed into one sitting. Historians still argue whether the rise of silent cinema created a shared cultural language or simply distracted the public from more serious post-war issues. Either way, people flocked to the theatres. Some towns had only one screen, and going to the movies was the weekly social event, the original binge night. You glance around the room. Some people lean forward, utterly transfixed. A few kids giggle too loudly. There's always one guy who coughs through the entire second act. But everyone is here to feel something: laughter, sorrow, suspense, all without a single spoken word. By the mid-1922nd, Hollywood was booming. Stars like Buster Keaton, Clara Bow, and Rudolph Valentino weren't just actors, they were deities. Teenagers plastered their bedrooms with glossy postcards of the It Girl or the Chic. Movie fan clubs popped up in schools and women's circles. And yes, people absolutely practiced their own dramatic fainting spells in mirrors at home. But for all the glamour of the stars, it was the accessibility of movies that made them so powerful. Anyone could walk into a theatre and forget they were broke, heartbroken, or in a small town where nothing ever happened. The flickering screen was democratic and communal. One lesser-known tidbit? Some theatres employed live narrators or lecturers, usually older men in suits who stood near the screen and explained the plot aloud during foreign films or avant-garde shorts. "He is sad now because his goat has escaped," they'd murmur, which sounds ridiculous until you remember most early films had no subtitles at all. Children loved slapstick, adults preferred melodrama, and teenagers just wanted to sit in the back row and maybe hold hands very scandalous. Theatres often had ushers who wielded flashlights like weapons of morality, ready to pounce on any couple who got too cozy. Of course, the movie-going experience wasn't always glamorous. If you sat in the front row, you left with a neck cramp and a popcorn kernel somewhere it shouldn't be. The projectors were loud and prone to jamming. Occasionally, the film would catch fire mid-show, sending up a trail of smoke and a chorus of groans. But no one seemed to care. They just wanted to be there. Theatres varied wildly in size and style. Some were ornate movie palaces with chandeliers, murals, and velvet curtains that parted like magic. Others were glorified sheds with folding chairs and a piano that hadn't been tuned since the Taft administration. But the sense of wonder was the same. By the late 1922nd, sound was creeping in. The talkies were on the horizon. But for now, you're watching Chaplin waddle across the screen, chased by a dog, a cop, and a lady with a parasol. The audience erupts in laughter, real, hearty, full-bodied laughter that rolls through the rows like a wave. There's something oddly peaceful about it all. No explosions, no plot twists that break your brain. Just exaggerated movement, comedic timing, and the occasional pie to the face. You don't need to understand every scene, you feel it. And here's your fringe detail for the night. During particularly emotional scenes, say, a dying mother or a lost child, theatres sometimes hired professional criers to sit in the audience and weep audibly. Their job? To set the mood and make everyone else feel safe to get misty-eyed. Honestly, we could still use those. The film ends. The organ trails off. The lights rise slowly, as if they too are reluctant to return to reality. People shuffle out, talking softly. You remain seated a bit longer, savouring the magic. Outside, the streets buzz again. But inside you, something's quiet. You've travelled to a world of black and white and found full-colour emotion. You've seen 1,000 stories in 1,000 gestures, and even though no one said a word, you understood every bit of it. You're walking now, but the sidewalk isn't quiet. It vibrates. Somewhere behind an unmarked door, a trumpet flares, a cymbal crashes, and someone laughs far too loudly. It's nighttime in the 1922nd, and jazz isn't just music. It's a movement, a rebellion, and for some, a scandal wrapped in syncopation. You pause in front of a speakeasy. No sign, just a red light above the door. A man in a newsboy cap gives you a quick once-over, then knocks 3 times in a rhythm that sounds suspiciously like shave and a haircut. The door creaks open. You step inside. It's hot, crowded, alive. Jazz crackles from the small corner stage where a trio plays like their instruments are on fire. There's a woman in a red dress, leaning against the piano, cigarette dangling, eyes closed as if she's listening to the notes touch her skin. This is the jazz age, and every night is a little dangerous. Prohibition, as you might know, was meant to make America more moral. Instead, it turned basements and backrooms into dens of rebellion and creativity. Speakeasies like this sprang up in every major city and many tiny towns too. They were often protected by bribes to local police or politicians. Historians still argue whether these illegal spots helped birth modern nightlife or simply normalized corruption. The answer is probably yes. Here's the thing. People didn't stop drinking in the 1922nd. They just got sneakier about it. Bathtubs brewed gin. Moonshine flowed from the Appalachian hills, and those who couldn't make it bought it discreetly from someone's cousin's cousin who knew a guy. You sit down at a small table, its surface already sticky with stories. A waitress in bobbed hair and sensible shoes hands you a teacup filled with something that burns slightly on the way down. Don't ask, just sip, she whispers. Now, the music. It's not the gentle hum of background dinner tunes. Jazz in the 22nd was all brass and bite. It startled you, seduced you, made your feet twitch involuntarily. Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Bessie Smith. These were the voices of an entire era, learning how to shout again after war and flu and grief. And jazz wasn't just for the elite. It was everywhere. Black musicians from Harlem to New Orleans to Kansas City became the unexpected soundtrack of white America's secret nightlife. Cross-cultural, cross-class. Dangerous to some, delicious to others. Jazz clubs often became the few places where people of different races mingled, danced, drank, and fell in love. One curious fact? Some speakeasies had secret second entrances for the band. Musicians were sometimes smuggled in through alleys or rooftops to avoid drawing attention or to keep racially integrated spaces from being shut down. America was still deeply segregated, but music poked holes in the walls. There's a guy near the stage right now doing the Charleston so hard you're worried for the structural integrity of the floor. He's got suspenders, 2-tone shoes, and 0 shame. His partner, in a flapper dress made of actual fringe, twirls until she nearly topples a tray of cocktails. Nobody minds. You try tapping your foot, but it's not enough. Jazz doesn't ask you to watch, it dares you to join. A clarinet wails. The crowd whoops. Someone leaps onto a table and starts dancing. It's a mess. A miracle. A moment. And let's not ignore the prohibition twist. In many cities, police knew these clubs existed. They raided them, sure, but often only when they needed a headline. Other times, they showed up, took a fine, and left with a bottle under their coat. One famous New York club even had a secret stairwell leading directly to a judge's office. Efficient, if nothing else. As you sip your mystery cocktail, a man next to you begins to recite poetry. Badly. The woman with him laughs anyway. A jazz singer starts a slow ballad, her voice rough and rich, like she's lived 10 lives already. You close your eyes and drift with her. The saxophone weaves under her words like a river under a bridge. The fringe detail tonight? There were underground jazz maps passed around by adventurous youth hand, drawn charts of all the best clubs, what nights had the best bands, which tea rooms served actual gin, and where to avoid the undercover cops who dressed far too cleanly to be convincing. You step out into the cool night air. It smells like sweat, smoke, and stories. A few blocks down, another door thuds open. Laughter spills out. The night isn't over, it's just warming up. But for now, you tuck your hands in your coat, tap one last time to the beat, still bouncing in your head, and walk home, buzzed not just from drink, but from the thrill of music and rebellion stitched together in one unforgettable chord. You're breathless now, not from running but from spinning. The beat still pulsing in your head as you duck out of that jazz club, only to land feet first in another frenzy. A dance hall packed with flappers, fedoras, and enough fringe to upholster a small couch. The room practically hums with energy. There's a band on stage, blasting out a snappy Charleston rhythm, and everyone's moving like they've forgotten gravity. You spot a woman doing a shimmy so intense it could probably churn butter. Her dress is sleeveless, her lipstick dangerously dark, and her hair bobbed to perfection. That's a flapper in the wild. You might think flappers were just about dresses and rebellion, and you'd be partly right. But the real revolution? They danced. Hard. They danced until sunrise in clubs, parlours, hotel ballrooms, and on rooftops under the moon. It wasn't delicate or demure. It was fierce, physical, and unapologetically fun. Historians still argue whether flapper culture was true liberation or just fashionable rebellion wrapped in sequins. But what's certain is this. For the first time, women had space to move, to kick off corsets, to cut their hair, to take up room on a dance floor without asking anyone's permission. And oh, the dances. The Charleston, the Black Bottom, the Lindy Hop. These weren't just steps, they were statements. Women weren't waiting for men to lead anymore. They grabbed partners, danced solo, even challenged each other to contests, all to a beat that screamed, "I am here and I am not behaving." Let's set the scene. The air is thick with perfume and sweat. The floor vibrates beneath your feet. Every table is pushed aside. Drinks are sloshing over the rims, and one poor hat just got trampled under a rogue heel. A trumpet blares. You don't know the moves, but nobody cares. You flap your arms, kick your legs, spin until the room blurs. It's not about skill, it's about spirit. Now for your quirky tidbit. Some cities tried to ban certain dances, labeling them immoral. In 1925, Pittsburgh officials threatened to shut down any establishment that allowed the Charleston, claiming it was too suggestive. The result? Secret Charleston clubs popped up, and people danced harder just to spite the rules. Classic. Meanwhile, men weren't exempt from the style revolution either. Out went the stiff collars and pocket watches. In came slim-cut suits, slicked hair, and a cigarette balanced just so. Think Gatsby at a garden party looking like he spent hours not trying too hard. But the flapper wasn't just a dancer. She was an image beamed out through magazines, films, and cigarette ads. She represented freedom, and maybe a little recklessness. She drove cars, drank gin, and read books with racy titles. And she terrified conservative parents everywhere. The fashion? Think beaded dresses that sparkled like crushed stars, heels that could double as weapons, and enough bangles to set off airport metal detectors if airports had existed like that yet. The goal wasn't to look sweet. It was to look sharp, powerful, untouchable. One fringe fact that's truly delightful. Some flappers used rouge, made from beet juice, mascara made from coal dust, and lipsticks in shades like cranberry flame and funeral red. Their makeup was as loud as their laughter, and even the act of wearing makeup in public was rebellious, a signal that they weren't playing by their mother's rules anymore. The dance hall itself is a mix of elegance and chaos. The chandeliers shake every time someone dips too low. There's a cigarette girl weaving through the crowd with a tray strapped to her hips, selling gum, mints, and matches. A man just split his pants attempting a knee slide. Nobody minds. Someone hands him a drink and keeps dancing. You grab a soda. Coca-Cola, still laced with actual coca leaves in some places, and lean against the wall, sweat cooling on your neck. You can't stop smiling. This isn't just dancing. It's defiance in motion. It's joy without apology. It's a generation shaking off war and whispering, "We're alive. Let's move." The band switches to a slower tune now. Couples pair off. Lights dim a touch. Somewhere in the crowd, a woman straightens her feathered headband and places her hand on a man's shoulder like it's a dare. They sway. It's clumsy and romantic, and entirely perfect. Outside, the world is still trying to figure out what to make of you, of all this. But inside, in this haze of jazz and movement, there are no rules, just rhythm. And as the night slides toward morning and your heels start to ache, you realize you'll come back here, again and again. Not just for the music, but for the feeling. That electric, bone-deep thrill that maybe, just maybe, this is what freedom looks like, in a dress that swishes and a song that never quite ends. The lights have dimmed in the dance hall, but outside, the roar of a different crowd echoes in your ears this time. Not syncopated jazz, but the unmistakable crack of a wooden bat meeting a leather ball. Welcome to the ballpark, friend. Hot dogs in one hand, hope in the other. You climb the bleachers of a 1,922nd baseball stadium, maybe Ebbets Field in Brooklyn or Comiskey Park in Chicago, and settle into a narrow wooden seat with a perfect view of the diamond. The smell is honest. Dirt, sweat, cigar smoke, mustard. A vendor yells, "Peanuts! Get your peanuts!" While somewhere nearby, a kid is already whining for a second soda. This isn't just a game. It's a full-on American ritual. And in the 1,922nd, there was one name that turned every stadium into a cathedral: Babe Ruth. George Herman, Babe Ruth, the Sultan of SWAT, the Colossus of Clout, the man who could hit a ball into next week while eating a hot dog with his other hand. Watching him swing was like witnessing a controlled explosion. You blink, and the ball's already over the fence. Baseball had been around for decades by then. But Ruth? Ruth made it the national pastime. He was loud, larger than life, not always polite but magnetic. Kids collected his trading cards, grown men tried to mimic his swing, and barbershops across America debated his stats like they were scripture. One lesser-known fact: Ruth didn't just play hard, he lived hard. Hot dogs by the dozen. Train cars of beer. Rumors swirled about him downing entire steak dinners before games. Historians still argue whether he was a reckless genius, or just a man too gifted to fail, even with a hangover. Possibly both. But it wasn't just Ruth. The 1,922nd saw the rise of the modern sports hero: Lou Gehrig, Rogers Hornsby, Ty Cobb, grumpier than a sack of wet cats. Ball players became mythic. Kids reenacted home runs in empty lots, using broom handles and chalked-up bricks for bases. And the stadiums? Colossal. Brick and steel fortresses that could hold tens of thousands. Fans packed in wearing fedoras and suspenders, clapping through 9 innings without checking a single notification. There were no instant replays, no slow motion, only fast living and faster fastballs. Here's your quirky tidbit. During one game, Babe Ruth was hit on the head by a falling tomato from the stands. Why? Because fans used to bring picnic baskets into the stadium. The tomato was likely an accident. Probably. But from that day on, Ruth wore his cap just a little tighter. You glance around and notice something that feels oddly modern: cheering. Yes, but also community. Baseball games were among the few spaces where working-class families, wealthy businessmen, and immigrants all gathered shoulder to shoulder, yelling at the same umpire. Even if they couldn't agree on politics, everyone agreed. That was a bad call at third. Of course, not everything was picture perfect. The leagues were still segregated. Black players, no matter how talented, were confined to the Negro leagues. That injustice would take decades to undo. But in their own right, players like Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson were already carving out legendary status, even if the wider world wasn't watching yet. You lean forward in your seat. Bottom of the ninth. 2 outs. Tie game, and then crack. The bat connects. The ball soars. For one glorious moment, the entire stadium holds its breath. You track the ball through the air, up into the sunlight, past all the noise, until it disappears over the fence like a promise kept. The crowd erupts, hats fly, strangers hug. Someone's yelling, "I told ya!" even though they definitely did not tell anyone. The batter rounds the bases, grinning like he just solved world peace. And you? You're standing now, clapping till your palms sting, feeling oddly emotional over a game you barely understand. But that's baseball. It doesn't need to make sense to feel real. It's ritual. It's rhythm. It's the soundtrack of a summer afternoon. And the hope that maybe, just maybe, your team might pull off a miracle. The game winds down. You wipe mustard off your chin and stand with the crowd. A brass band plays near the gate, belting out a ragtime version of "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." You hum along badly, and as you shuffle out with the masses, one final fringe detail follows you. In the 1922nd, women began attending baseball games in larger numbers, not just as chaperones or novelty guests, but as fans. Some even kept meticulous scorebooks, often more accurately than the official scorers. They weren't there to be impressed, they were there to watch. Back on the street, the roar of the stadium still rings in your ears. Your clothes smell faintly of dirt and peanuts, and though your team may not have won, you still walk taller. Because for a few hours, you were part of something big, something loud, something beautifully pointless, and yet entirely unforgettable. You wake up the next morning to the sound of roosters and the smell of pie. Not a bad start, right? Today isn't about dancing or baseball, it's fair day. You're off to the county fairgrounds, where dust sticks to your boots and everyone you've ever known is either selling something, judging something, or trying to beat your pie score from last year. You hop onto a wooden cart hitched to a sputtering Ford, headed down a bumpy dirt road lined with hand-painted signs. Tomato weigh-off, cow judging, Jell-O molding contest, pie contest. Noon, sharp. You already feel the tension in your gut, and it's not from the pie yet. County fairs in the 1922nd weren't quaint. They were loud, sprawling spectacles of Americana. Think of them as the original social media, a place where you didn't scroll through updates, you lived them. You saw your neighbor's prize chickens in person, you tried their pickles, you lost to their aunts in sack races. You walked past the gates and into a world of flapping tents, clanging tin games, and screaming toddlers on sugar highs. There's a man with a megaphone announcing the start of a 3-legged race. Nearby, someone's selling hot roasted peanuts in wax paper bags and telling you they cure headaches and bad tempers. You're pretty sure that's false, but you buy too. Mainstream fact time. County and state fairs were often sponsored by agricultural societies and local governments to boost rural pride and introduce technological wonders. You could visit the electric barn and marvel at a butter churn powered by motors, or a cream separator that looked like a steampunk spaceship. To 1922nd farm folks, these were practically sorcery. And then there's the pie table. You approach it slowly, reverently. This is not your average bake sale. This is a battlefield of crusts. There's your grandma's blueberry, Old Mrs., Dobbin's gooseberry, a dark horse entry, and your own modest yet confident apple pie double crust, brushed with a light egg wash, cinnamon just right. A tall man in overalls, holding a clipboard and a fork, starts making the rounds. He takes his job seriously. People are whispering, some are glaring. One woman prays softly over her pecan tart. You join the crowd and try not to look anxious. Meanwhile, a brass band starts playing near the main pavilion. Kids tug their parents toward the carousel, which is hand-cranked by a teenager who looks like he regrets every decision in his life. A livestock parade passes through the center aisle. Cows with ribbons, pigs with bows, goats doing whatever they want. Here's your fringe tidbit. In some 1,922nd pie contests, cheating was not unheard of. Rumours swirled about store-bought crusts passed off as homemade, or pies submitted under a relative's name for better odds. One Michigan contest even disqualified a pie for having too perfect a lattice top, clearly the work of an out-of-toner. Back to your apple pie. The judge pauses, fork poised. He takes a bite, chews slowly, nods. A woman next to you gasps. Is that good? Bad? A pie-based cliffhanger. He scribbles something on the clipboard and moves on. You release a breath you didn't know you were holding. Around you, the fair continues to pulse. There's a man selling miracle liniment that smells suspiciously like turpentine. A fiddle contest rages in the background, with contestants soaring at strings like they're chasing away demons. Kids dart between booths, clutching sticky candy apples and trying to win goldfish in questionable plastic bags. Historians still argue whether county fairs were genuine community builders or cleverly disguised consumer traps. Were they about celebrating local heritage or buying 5 kinds of jam from Mildred just to avoid an awkward conversation later? But that misses the point. The fair wasn't about winning or buying. It was about showing up, being seen, laughing until your sides hurt, losing a cakewalk to a 7-year-old and clapping anyway, watching your neighbour's chicken lay an egg during judging and hearing the crowd erupt like it just scored a touchdown. The day stretches on. You eat fried dough. You lose 3 rounds at ring toss. You get your palm read by a teenage fortune teller who smells like vanilla and insists you'll marry someone with strong thighs and great land. Noted. And finally, the pie results. A local dignitary steps onto a wooden crate with a rusty megaphone. He clears his throat. The crowd gathers. "Third place," he shouts, "goes to Bertha Clemens' lemon chiffon." Cheers. "Second place, old Mrs. Dobbins and her gooseberry miracle." Gasps. A scandal. She was predicted to win. "And first place," he pauses, and your stomach drops like a rock in a well, goes to the apple pie with the flakiest crust and the boldest cinnamon finish. Baked by you. Your name. You blink. You won. The prize? A blue ribbon, a small silver plate, and immortality on the community bulletin board until next year. You're mobbed by friendly handshakes and one very intense hug from someone named Mabel. You laugh. You cry a little. You eat more pie. And as the sun dips low behind the barns, you lean back against a hay bale and watch the last carousel ride spin in slow circles. The fair's almost over. The air smells like popcorn and dusk. And in this quiet, you realize that joy doesn't have to be grand. Sometimes it's crust and cinnamon and a room full of people who know your name. The scent of fresh sawdust and footlights hits you next, rich, warm, and laced with a strange hint of nervous anticipation. You follow a small parade of kids, parents, and curious townfolk into a big striped tent. The sign outside reads, "Vaudeville tonight, 6 acts, no regrets." You grab a folding chair near the front. It's wobbly. The tent flaps gently in the wind. There's no air conditioning, but who cares? The stage is small, just a few worn planks and a velvet curtain that's definitely seen better decades. But the crowd is buzzing, clutching lemonade cups and bags of peanuts, eyes wide with expectation. Vaudeville in the 1922nd wasn't just entertainment, it was everything. Before television, before TikTok, before someone could become famous for folding a towel creatively, vaudeville was how Americans laughed, gasped, and occasionally questioned what they'd just witnessed. Historians still argue whether vaudeville was a unifier across class and ethnicity, or just another form of cultural escapism. But here's what we do know. On a single stage, in one night, you might see a ventriloquist, a tap-dancing dog, a yodeling farmer, and a man who can balance a typewriter on his forehead. Tonight, the MC waddles on stage in an oversized tuxedo and top hat, armed with a rubber chicken and a lot of confidence. He delivers a few puns so bad they loop around to being funny again. A polite chuckle. A groan. Then, the acts begin. First up, a magician who insists on being called the Astonisher. His tricks are sloppy but charming. He pulls a very sleepy rabbit out of a hat, makes a handkerchief disappear, you suspect he swallowed it, and ends with a levitating table that's clearly being hoisted by string. The kids love it. Next, a tap dancer with legs like pistons. She doesn't miss a beat, even when a toddler crawls on stage and starts imitating her moves. Fringe detail? In small towns, kids sometimes were the act's local talent nights let neighborhood hopefuls share the spotlight, however briefly. Then there's the juggler. Apples, knives, and finally flaming torches. At one point, he drops everything and just shrugs. The audience cheers louder. Failure was part of the fun. The fourth act is complicated. It's a comedy team of two brothers who clearly hate each other. Their timing is off. Their jokes are old. But somehow, that makes it funnier. A woman in the back laughs so hard she snorts and nearly spills her lemonade. Your quirky tidbit tonight? There was a real act on the vaudeville circuit in the 1922nd that featured a pianist who only played with his feet. He wore gloves on his toes and everything. He opened for a man who made balloon animals before balloon animals were even a thing. Innovation is eternal. Back in your tent, the fifth act starts, and it's a barbershop quartet. 4 men in striped vests and straw hats line up, hum, and then dive into tight harmonies about lost loves, shiny shoes, and something called Margie's Marmalade. It's sweet, syrupy, and a bit silly. The audience sways along. And finally, the headliner, Dottie Darling and her remarkable canine review. A woman in sequins enters, holding a parasol. Behind her, 6 dogs each in tiny outfits march in a line. One wears a sailor suit, one wears glasses. They perform tricks, sit, roll, jump through hoops. But the real magic is when she gets them to sing along to a gramophone recording of Ain't We Got Fun. It's absurd, it's genius. It brings the tent down. The crowd erupts, kids jump out of their chairs. Someone throws a bouquet, likely stolen from the pie contest. Dottie bows deeply, the dogs wag their tails, and the curtain falls well, sort of slides sideways and gets stuck halfway. Close enough. You step outside, laughing with people you didn't know when you arrived but somehow feel connected to now. That's vaudeville. Imperfect. Random. Glorious. Mainstream fact. Many of Hollywood's biggest stars got their start in vaudeville. Fred Astaire, Judy Garland, even the Marx Brothers. They honed their craft on stages just like this, perfecting timing, stamina, and the art of winning over a crowd with nothing but sweat, sparkle, and maybe a unicycle. The sun is setting now, painting everything in soft gold. The air has cooled. The empty stage creaks in the wind. A boy runs past you, swinging a bag of popcorn like a trophy. You smile, because you've just spent the last hour surrounded by misfits, talent, and joy in its most homemade form. And as you head home, the echo of tap shoes and bad puns still clinging to your ears, you realize that not every performance needs to be perfect. Sometimes, it just needs to be human. Tonight, you're staying in. No jazz clubs, no midway lights, no dogs in tiny outfits, just a crackling fireplace, a pot of weak tea, and a game of parcheesi that's already 3 hours too long. Welcome to the great American tradition of the parlor game night, a surprisingly fierce, occasionally ridiculous, but always heartwarming staple of 1,922nd free time. You settle into an overstuffed armchair in the family parlor, surrounded by cousins, neighbors, and that one uncle who always forgets the rules when he's losing. The lamps glow low. Someone's knitting in the corner. There's a plate of molasses cookies on the table, and the family cat is actively plotting to swipe one. The board game is already set up. Monopoly? Not quite. That won't rise to fame until the 1932nd. Instead, it's the game of life, pit, or the ever-mysterious flinch, which no one understands but everyone insists they used to be good at. Mainstream fact. The 1922nd saw an explosion of mass-produced board and card games, thanks to improved printing technology and a growing middle class. Parker Brothers and Milton Bradley became household names, and game nights became a weekly ritual for families, especially during colder months when entertainment had to happen indoors or within shouting distance of Grandma. Tonight's game? Bridge. Because nothing says leisure like a competitive card game that ruins friendships in polite silence. You're partnered with your Aunt Edna, who has an iron memory and zero mercy. Across from you are your father, who bluffs like it's a survival skill, and your cousin Harold, who keeps dropping his cards because he insists on eating sticky toffee with the same hand. You fan out your cards and Aunt Edna gives you a look. No words. Just that knowing, barely perceptible nod that either means, "We've got this," or "Play the wrong suit and I'll put you in my will backwards." Bridge wasn't just a pastime. In many households, it was the entertainment event of the week. People dressed up for it, practiced strategies, kept little notebooks of bidding systems. Some even joined bridge clubs, where matches were tracked with the seriousness of Olympic events. And while the adults played, the kids had their own games: charades, checkers, old maid, and of course the ever-chaotic pick-up sticks. One wrong move, and someone's getting a chopstick to the eyeball. Good times. Quirky tidbit. 1922nd party game, known as the Minister's Cat, involved going around the room saying adjectives in alphabetical order to describe a fictional cat. The Minister's Cat is an arrogant cat, a brave cat, a cantankerous cat. Miss a letter? You're out. Result: tears, laughter, and a surprising number of insults toward imaginary felines. Back in the parlor, things are getting heated. Your uncle accuses your father of underbidding. Aunt Edna corrects everyone with the calm confidence of a woman who's never been wrong. You play a perfect hand, the cat eats a cookie, all is well. But game night isn't just about the game. It's about the stories told between rounds, the war tales, the old ghost stories, the dramatic retellings of last week's PTA meeting. It's where jokes are passed down, gossip is lightly salted, and the younger kids learn which family members have the best poker faces. Historians still argue whether these kinds of evenings truly bonded families or simply prevented cabin fever from setting in. But most agree that they gave people a reason to gather, especially in a time when going out often required money, transportation, or prohibition endangering risk. You glance over at the sideboard, where a puzzle sits half-finished, a landscape of a mountain cabin with one suspiciously missing piece, which you know the baby swallowed last week. In the corner, a Victrola hums quietly, playing a scratchy waltz. Someone hums along. The fire pops. The kettle whistles. The night winds down slowly. Someone suggests a round of telephone, and 5 minutes later, the weather is nice, becomes the mayor is a rhinoceros. Predictable, delightful. As the last game is packed away and chairs are pushed back, you help gather the cards, sticky toffee wrappers, and at least 3 buttons no one admits to losing. The cat glares from the windowsill. Aunt Edna pats you on the shoulder and says, "You've got potential, once you learn to count." You laugh, because in this house, affection is delivered with sarcasm and a firm handshake. And as the oil lamp flickers low and someone puts out the last of the cookies, you realize that some of the best moments in the 1922nd weren't about spectacle or speed or being seen. They were about being together, around a table, in shared light, creating tiny traditions that somehow stretched across generations. This morning, you're lacing up boots that are slightly too tight, filling a canvas sack with beans, and wondering why you ever agreed to this. You're headed outdoors, not to a city park or a country fair this time, but deep into the kind of nature that doesn't offer refunds or bathrooms. Camping in the 1922nd wasn't what it is today. No thermarists, no collapsible stoves, no freeze-dried anything. You brought what you had: blankets, canned food, matches if you were lucky, and hoped the weather didn't hate you. Still, despite the challenges, or maybe because of them, Americans flocked to the great outdoors in record numbers. Fishing, hiking, canoeing, and camping all surged in popularity, especially among middle-class families who now had weekends off and slightly better cars. The Model T could handle a lot of things. Muddy trails wasn't one of them, but people tried anyway. You bump along a dirt road in a Ford that smells like gas, rust, and determination. The scenery blurs past rolling hills, tall pines, a stream so clear you could bottle it. When you finally stop, the silence feels enormous. No horns, no jazz, just the occasional bird chirp, and your cousin loudly announcing he forgot the tent stakes. Again. Historians still debate whether this return to nature was spiritual, recreational, or simply a rejection of the fast-paced, machine-filled modern life. But one thing's certain: Americans in the 1922nd were ready to rough it, even if their definition of roughing it included a coffee pot and a deck of cards. You set up camp with a lot of optimism and very little instruction. The tent leans like a tipsy uncle. The fire pit smokes more than it flames. But eventually, there's bacon in the skillet, and all is forgiven. Mainstream fact. The Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts gained huge popularity in this era. Their badges, uniforms, and be prepared mantras shaped how millions of kids interacted with the natural world and how they learned to tie 1,000 different knots, most of which were entirely useless at home. You grab a fishing pole, basically a stick, some twine, and a bent paperclip and head toward the water. The lake is still, glassy, with dragonflies skimming its surface. You cast. Wait. Cast again. Something nibbles. Is it a fish? A twig? A prank by your brother tugging your line from a nearby bush? All three are possible, and then you catch one, a tiny sunfish, no bigger than your hand. You hold it up like you just discovered gold. Your uncle applauds. Your sister rolls her eyes. The fish looks unimpressed. Later, you hike. Nothing serious, just a mile or two through tall grass, past wildflowers with names you pretend to know. There's something peaceful about it. The way everything moves, but nothing rushes. The way the wind sounds like it has secrets, but doesn't feel the need to share them all at once. You stop by a tree and carve your initials into the bark. Somewhere down the trail, someone has left a tiny cairn of rocks. It feels ancient, though it was probably made by a bored 1-2-year-old last week. Time for your fringe tidbit. Campfire storytelling became such a common ritual in this era that local libraries published official story guides for families to bring on trips complete with jokes, ghost stories, and moral parables. Because even in the woods, you must learn something. Back at camp, you build a fire. This one works. Kind of. The flames are small but respectable. Dinner is canned beans, fried potatoes, and toast you made by skewering bread on a stick. Someone accidentally drops their plate in the dirt and shrugs. That's nature's seasoning. The stars begin to appear. One by one. The sky is so dark, so wide, you feel like you might fall into it. The Milky Way stretches overhead, a powdered sugar streak across black velvet. A coyote howls. You pretend it's far away. You all gather around the fire. Someone pulls out a harmonica. Another, a tattered book of poems. You roast marshmallows until they're just slightly scorched. The younger kids fight over who gets the longest stick. The adults tell stories, some true, some probably not. All of them worth hearing. And here's the magic. You're not bored. Not even a little. Despite the lack of screens, schedules, or official entertainment, your brain feels full in the best way. Like it's recharging not just with rest, but with real quiet. Later, you climb into your lopsided tent and curl into a scratchy wool blanket. The ground is harder than expected. A pine cone has made itself a pillow, but the air smells like smoke and moss and freedom. Historians may argue over what camping really meant in the Roaring Twenties, whether it was escapism or survival skills or just a chance to see trees. But for you, right now, it's a reminder that life doesn't always need to be dressed up. Sometimes it's just about warmth, company, and a night sky so big you forget your own name for a while. The tent zips shut behind you, the scent of pine and ash still clinging to your clothes. But now the soundscape shifts from chirping birds and crackling fires to the soft purr of an engine. Today, you're going for a ride. Not just any ride. Mind you, this is the grand Sunday drive. You slide into the passenger seat of a Ford Model T. The seats are firm, the steering wheel feels too big, and the windshield is mostly for decoration. The car smells like oil, leather, and pipe tobacco. Dad is at the wheel, wearing gloves like he's piloting a biplane. Mom adjusts her cloche hat in the side mirror, which is actually just a shiny bit of polished tin. Welcome to one of the quietest revolutions of the 1922nd, the automobile transforming leisure. By the middle of the decade, cars were no longer exclusive to the wealthy. Thanks to Henry Ford's assembly line genius and that lovable, unkillable Model T, families across America had wheels. They weren't just driving to work, they were driving nowhere in particular, and loving every bumpy, dusty minute of it. You rattle down a country road with zero shock absorption, squinting into the breeze because the car windows don't roll up, they don't exist. Every pothole feels like a full-body experience. But still, you smile. Because this is freedom. Mainstream fact. By 1925, over 17 million cars were registered in the United States. The car wasn't just a tool anymore. It was a status symbol, a passport, and a family member. The Sunday drive became a ritual, especially for middle-class families looking to escape town without leaving the planet. You pass fields of corn, gas stations that sell cola in glass bottles, and hand-painted signs that say, "Eat here," and "Free ice water," and oddly, "Turn back now," seriously. Your father waves at every car you pass. There are only 3, but still, it's the polite thing to do. Now for your quirky tidbit. Some families in the 1922nd kept what they called a Sunday journal in the glove box. A small notebook where they documented where they went, how long it took, and how many cows they saw along the way. One famous journal entry read simply, "Drove 3 hours, saw 6 cows. One was suspicious." You pull off at a roadside picnic area. No fancy signage, no amenities, just a grassy patch near a creek. Blankets are spread, sandwiches appear. Someone finds a harmonica in the glove box. You eat egg salad with warm root beer and call it gourmet. The dog tries to steal a pickle. Uncle Marvin accidentally sits on a beat. There's something timeless about it. Nothing to prove, no destination, just motion. Just the road stretching ahead like a promise with no deadline. Historians still argue whether the Sunday drive was born out of wanderlust or boredom. Was it about exploration, or just the thrill of not being in the house with 6 kids and a cranky radio? Either way, it stuck. Even today, people still go for a drive with no plan in mind. That habit? Pure 1922nd. After lunch, your father fiddles with the hood. The engine hisses. A belt squeals. Everyone pretends this is normal. Eventually, with some muttered curses and a borrowed hairpin, the car grumbles back to life. No one claps, but everyone breathes easier. The drive continues. You pass a billboard advertising gasoline and grapes 2 miles ahead. A family waves from a front porch. Your little brother falls asleep with his head against the window frame and a line of drool that could water a plant. Your fringe detail for the day. In some rural towns, teenagers would actually schedule their Sunday drives to accidentally pass each other, creating impromptu car parades where flirting happened through honks, hat tips, and occasionally thrown candy. Low-tech romance at its finest. Eventually, the sun begins to dip. The shadows grow longer. The wind feels cooler. You turn onto a familiar street, the tires crunching over gravel as you roll back home. And as the car engine sputters to silence, you sit for just a moment longer before getting out. Because somehow, even though you didn't go anywhere important, you feel like you traveled. Like the road itself gave you something. Space to breathe. Time to think. A kind of quiet that buzzes instead of echoes. In a world that was racing ahead with skyscrapers rising and cities roaring, the Sunday drive reminded everyone to slow down, to wander, to roll the windows down, or pretend you had them, and let the breeze do what it does best. Remind you that you're alive. You're back inside now, legs tucked under a blanket, eyes fixed on a wooden box, crackling with static and wonder. No, it's not a fireplace, it's a radio. And tonight, it's the loudest, most magical voice in the house. The family gathers around like they're meeting a celebrity. The room dims. Mom knits. Dad smokes his pipe. Your siblings squabble over who gets the chair closest to the speaker. You all hush as the familiar phrase crackles through, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen." In the 1922nd, the radio was your internet, television, and gossip column all rolled into one humming, glowing centerpiece. And you didn't just listen to it, you leaned into it. You stared at it like it could see you back. Mainstream fact. By the mid-1922nd, over 5 million American households owned a radio set. That number doubled by the end of the decade. Radios weren't just trendy, they became furniture. often tucked inside elegant wooden cabinets that made them look like sacred altars to the gods of static and song. Tonight's programming? A little bit of everything. First, the news. Delivered in the clipped, confident tone of a man who definitely wears suspenders. He talks about Congress, international affairs, and a new bridge opening in Ohio like it's a moon landing. You don't understand all of it, but you trust him completely. That voice? It could command armies and sell you soap. Then your favorite part, the drama. An episode of The Shadow. The music swells. A deep voice whispers, "Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men?" And someone in the room gasps every time like it's the first time. Historians still argue whether radio encouraged deeper national unity or simply amplified cultural divides. But either way, it created something powerful, shared listening moments. You and millions of others are laughing at the same jokes, gasping at the same gunshots, and picturing the same dark alley, all without a screen. And the commercials? Oh, there's something else. A cheerful voice interrupts your murder mystery to tell you that bright clean tooth powder will make your breath as fresh as a mountain breeze, followed by a jingle that will be stuck in your head forever. You hum it anyway. Someone in the back of the room whispers, "Do we have any left?" And someone else says, "No, but we do have baking soda," like it's the same thing. Your quirky tidbit for tonight. Some families created official radio schedules, written on paper and stuck to the wall with a thumbtack. These schedules outlined when to turn the volume down, when not to interrupt, and most importantly when Grandpa gets to pick, usually classical music or extremely slow baseball recaps. As the program shifts into a musical variety hour, you close your eyes and let the sounds pour in. A trumpet solo from a band in Chicago, followed by a soprano from New York, followed by a man making duck sounds with his hands. You don't question it. This is entertainment. Suddenly, there's a buzz, then silence, then a clumsy return to the program. Someone kicks the cabinet. It buzzes again. The youngest sibling begins to cry because the duck sounds were their favorite part. Dad fiddles with the tuning knob, and eventually the warm glow of the tubes returns. Everyone sighs in relief, like you've just reconnected with a long-lost friend. You glance around the room. There's a quiet intimacy here, heads close together, feet under the same blanket, no distractions but the flickering imagination the radio brings. Someone whispers, "This is a good one," and no one replies, because they're already lost in it. Fringe fact? Some early radio shows faked live sound effects using things around the studio. Thunder, a sheet of metal, footsteps, coconuts on a wooden board, and breaking glass? Well, sometimes they just actually broke glass. A little messy, sure, but authentic. As the final program fades and the host signs off with a jaunty, "We'll see you next time, folks," which is ironic because no one can actually see anyone, your mother clicks the knob. The hum dies. The silence returns like a soft blanket pulled over the house. But the silence doesn't feel empty. It's full of characters, melodies, voices that seem to reach out from the great beyond and say, "We're here. You're not alone. Obi." And as you shuffle off to bed, the radio still glowing faintly with residual heat, you feel connected not just to your family but to millions of invisible listeners scattered across the country, each of them tucking into sleep with the same stories echoing in their minds. You're squinting under a fluorescent light now, hands wrapped around a lukewarm soda, while two bone-tired dancers cling to each other for dear life. Welcome to the wild, weird, and slightly sweaty world of dance marathons, America's most exhausting form of fun. It's midnight, or maybe 3 a.m. Hard to say. The crowd's thinning, the band's quieter, but the dancers, they're still going, shuffling in slow, dreamy circles, half awake, half dazed, fully determined. One woman rests her head on her partner's chest, eyes closed, moving purely on instinct. A man nearby dances while chewing gum and reciting the Lord's Prayer. You've never seen anything like this. In the 1922nd, dance marathons weren't just entertainment, they were spectacles, contests, tests of stamina, willpower, and how badly someone wanted $500 and a decent sandwich. Mainstream fact. These events began as playful competitions, but quickly escalated into endurance marathons, some lasting days, weeks, even months. Contestants danced, or dragged their feet in a close approximation of dancing, almost non-stop, allowed only short breaks every few hours for food, rest, or to put it delicately, not collapsing. And people loved to watch. The bleachers are full spectators in coats and hats, sipping coffee and cheering for their favourite couples like it's a prize fight. There's a scoreboard overhead, a bell for timeouts, and a nurse on standby. The MC strolls around with a megaphone, barking updates. Couple number 12 still hanging on. Couple number 8 is back after a nosebleed. Let's hear it, folks. You clap without thinking. You're emotionally invested now. Historians still argue whether dance marathons were exploitative or empowering. Some see them as grueling displays of desperation during hard times. Others say they gave working-class folks a real shot at prize money and fleeting fame. As usual, the truth probably sways somewhere in the middle, like the dancers themselves. The rules? Simple. Keep moving. No sitting, no lying down, no sleeping unless you can do it upright, draped across your partner's shoulder like a wilted houseplant. Some couples developed entire microsystems, switching leads, massaging sore feet mid-step, and inventing slow steps that looked like dancing but were really napping in motion. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some competitions hired fake couples ringers paid to stir up drama, fake arguments, or conveniently collapse at dramatic moments. Think reality television, but with more blisters and less editing. You get up for a better view and weave through the crowd. You pass tables where people are placing informal bets, jotting couple numbers on napkins. Someone passes out a flyer. Thursday spaghetti feed and dance. Off. The woman next to you mutters, I saw number 6 steal a roll from the buffet. Just saying. You spot one pair teens, maybe 17 still swinging to the music, hair stuck to their faces with sweat, shoes worn nearly flat. But they're smiling. Somehow, they're still smiling. It wasn't all about the money. For many, this was their shot at a brief spotlight. Local papers would cover the marathons. Winners sometimes went on to vaudeville tours or radio shows. At least for a few months, they were famous for having danced longer than anyone else thought possible. Some events turned into full-on soap operas. Spectators returned night after night to see who was arguing, who was flirting, and whether someone would finally pass out face first into the punch bowl. One 1,928 competition in Chicago even had a scandal where 2 couples switched partners mid-marathon. Scandalous. Delicious. You grab a snack from the concession stand, a lukewarm pickle, and a soda that tastes vaguely of licorice. You sit back down and notice the MC starting another round of spotlight eliminations. The music stops. The dancers freeze. Then he calls, couple number 4, you're out. The crowd boos. One woman throws a handkerchief in protest. Justice for couple number 4. Fringe detail? Some marathons added themed nights to keep things spicy. Toga night, formal wear night, even dance backward only night. It made the audience laugh. It made the dancers want to cry. But hey, rules are rules. As the night drags on, you start to see the rhythm in the chaos. The sway of bodies, the stomp of tired shoes, the strange beauty of people pushing themselves just to keep moving. The DJ, probably also the janitor, switches to a slower tune, a lullaby with a trombone. You exhale. A woman in front of you whispers, I could never do that. Then she adds, but I admire the ones who try. You nod. You feel the same. Because this isn't just dancing, it's surviving, it's performing. It's daring someone to tell you you're not strong enough. And as you leave the hall, the music still faint behind you, you look back one last time. The dancers are still circling. Barely, but still. And that, somehow, feels like the whole era in motion. You're flipping pages now, your thumbs smudged with ink, your brain racing to keep up with the drama. Welcome to your quiet addiction. Reading. But not just any reading. It's the 1922nd and you're devouring pulp novels, poetry, advice columns and paperbacks like they're forbidden fruit. The living room is still. The radio's off. Someone snores softly from the divan. But you? You're 10 chapters deep in a story titled The Crimson Heiress, where a duchess solves murders and also knits her own hats. High literature? Maybe not. But it's yours. In the 1922nd, reading wasn't just educational, it was an escape hatch, a vacation you could fold into your pocket. Literacy rates were rising, books were more affordable, and America was hungry for words. Magazines, penny novels, hardbacks, newsprint if it had a plot and at least 2 dramatic fainting scenes, it sold. Mainstream fact: public libraries were booming. By 1929, more than 10,000 public libraries dotted the United States, and they weren't just for the elite. Farmers, clerks, children, immigrants, everyone was checking out books, one paper card at a time. You pull out a stack from your bookshelf, really, just a wooden crate turned sideways. Asterisk, how to win friends at bridge. Prepare etiquette for dangerous women. Asterisk, the lone sheriff's secret baby. Asterisk. And of course, the wildly popular The Adventures of Tarzan, which you've read 3 times and still cry when the monkey dies. Reading wasn't passive. It was personal. You cried, laughed, and occasionally screamed when a plot twist hit you like a sack of flour. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some cities had traveling libraries, literal bookmobiles pulled by horses or early trucks. They'd rumble down dirt roads and park in front of farms, schools, and factories, offering a rotating treasure trove of books to people who otherwise couldn't get to a library. The sign often said, "Take 2, return 1. Unless you're my cousin, then just bring something back, please." You flip now to a different kind of reading. Advice columns. Pages filled with letters like, "My suitor says I shouldn't vote. Is that love?" Or, "How do I serve fish if I don't own a fish fork?" The answers were a mix of snark, formality, and genuine wisdom. Then there's the poetry. You read verses that ache with longing and occasional melodrama. Sonnets about the ocean, haikus about unripe peaches, free verse that makes no sense but sounds delicious when whispered aloud near an open window. You pause for a moment, stretch, and reach for a different stack. Pulp fiction. Bright covers, bold fonts. Titles like The Werewolf's Wife or Murder by Moonlight. These weren't for the faint of heart or the highbrow. These were for thrill seekers, romantics, and people who liked their dialogue spicy and their villains very obviously evil. You dive into one, The Red Widow's Revenge. Chapter 1 starts with a gunshot. Chapter 2 starts with a kiss. Chapter 3 includes both. By Chapter 4, you're fully convinced you could be a private detective if you really had to. Historians still argue whether pulp fiction contributed to moral decay or just gave people a healthy emotional outlet. But millions read them, stashed them under beds, traded them behind schools, and waited breathlessly for the next issue. Which sounds a lot like every great fandom ever. Your little brother bursts in now, holding a dog-eared comic book. Not superheroes yet, but cowboy tales and spooky adventures with titles like Blazing Saddles of Doom and The Phantom Barber of Chicago. He flops next to you and starts reading aloud in funny voices. You don't stop him. He's doing a pretty good Dracula. Fringe detail? Some magazines included do-it-yourself radio scripts for families to perform at home, complete with suggested sound effects, like slamming drawers, drumming fingers, and dramatic gasps. Think bedtime stories, but with 50% more yelling. You look up now. The room has shifted. Your sister's reading a recipe book and muttering about gelatin. Your dad's asleep with a travel guide on his chest. The dog is chewing the corner of the Crimson Heiress, and you're too relaxed to care. There's no television flickering, no pop-up ads. Just turning pages, passing time, and living a dozen lives in one quiet afternoon. And that's the thing about reading in the 22nd. It wasn't about escaping your life. It was about expanding it, exploring it, filling it with things you hadn't felt yet. You set the book down, stretch, crack your knuckles, then reach for the next one, already wondering what kind of mischief, romance, or revenge waits on the first page. You're pouring coffee into a china teacup now delicately, of course while 5 other women sit around you discussing books, politics, and why Helen's new haircut is brave. Welcome to the intimate, intricate world of women's clubs and community circles, where conversation is both an art and a mild competitive sport. It's Tuesday afternoon, and the drawing room smells faintly of lavender polish and ginger biscuits. The ladies have arrived on time, wearing their best cloche hats, stockings straight, gloves neatly folded in their laps. Someone brought lemon bars. Someone else brought news from the mayor's wife. And you? You brought your opinions and a strong desire not to get steamrolled by Martha again. In the 1922nd, women's clubs were the social engines of small towns and bustling cities alike. Long before social media or texting groups, these circles gave women a chance to connect, organize, learn, and occasionally deliver epic takedowns in the form of polite debate. Mainstream fact: by the mid-1922nd, there were more than 1 million women actively involved in local clubs across the United States. These weren't just tea parties, they were civic, educational, literary, and sometimes downright revolutionary gatherings. Book clubs, garden societies, suffrage follow-ups, Red Cross auxiliaries, bridge leagues with eyebrow-raising side gossip. You sip your coffee and nod as someone reads the opening line from Ethan Frome, followed immediately by a long sigh and, "Oh, I cannot," with that ending. The conversation snowballs into a spirited debate about literary realism, marriage, and whether fictional men should be allowed to make decisions at all. Across the room, someone produces minutes from the last meeting. Yes, minutes. These gatherings are nothing if not organized. A vote is held to raise money for the new library roof. The motion passes. Another vote is proposed, whether or not to serve deviled eggs again next week. The motion fails. Ruth is furious. Here's your quirky tidbit. Many clubs had strict rules about who could speak when. A spoon would be placed in the center of the table, and only the person holding the spoon could talk. If someone interrupted, the spoon was forfeited. It was a mix of democratic procedure and light emotional warfare. You look around the room and realize these aren't just meetings, they're lifelines. For many women, especially housewives and widows, community clubs were their only regular outlet for adult conversation, creative expression, and leadership. These were places where ideas grew and where reputations could be destroyed over a poorly executed cobbler. Historians still argue whether these clubs primarily reinforced social norms or pushed boundaries. On the surface, sure, they were about floral arrangements and book reviews. But beneath the lace, doilies were discussions about birth control, labor rights, education reform, and what to do when your neighbor starts attending seances. Speaking of which, Gladys has just brought up seances. Again, you lean back, hiding your grin behind your teacup, as the group dives into a whispered debate about spiritualism, Ouija boards, and whether that table ever really levitated at June's house last fall. You don't believe in ghosts, but you do believe in drama, so you're staying tuned. Next up, a roundtable about charity efforts. The club is collecting canned goods for the local orphanage and sewing flannel nightshirts for the hospital. You agree to make 3. Helen signs up for 6. You glare at her. It's subtle, but she knows. Fring a detail for today. Some elite women's clubs had lecture series, where they'd invite guest speakers everything from poets to paleontologists, to a man who once gave a 45-minute presentation on the emotional life of turnips. Apparently, it was a hit. By the end of the afternoon, the teacups are mostly empty. The minutes are tucked back into their folder. The lemon bars are mysteriously gone. You suspect Ruth took a few home in her purse. And you? You feel a little taller, a little sharper, because it wasn't just about the books, or the voting, or the recipes for rhubarb preserves. It was about being in the room, about being heard, about having a voice that didn't get cut off mid-sentence because someone else needed the salt. And as you walk home under a sky slowly turning pink, the cool breeze pressing the scent of hydrangeas into your coat, you realize something kind of beautiful. This is power. Quiet. Steady. Cup of coffee power. Tonight, the lights are dim. Candles flicker on a lace-covered table. The room smells like rosewater, dust, and a hint of burnt toast that no one wants to talk about. A group has gathered not for bridge, not for book club, but for something otherworldly. Someone has pulled the curtains tight. Someone else is setting down a planchette. That's right, you've found yourself at a Milneuf sans vingt séance night. You sit back and watch as Aunt Clara dramatically clutches her pearls and says, "Don't break the circle, or the spirits may not find their way back." A teenager snorts. Someone lights incense. And with that, the world of spiritualism creaks open like a dusty attic door. Spiritualism had its heyday in the late 19th century, but in the 1922nd, it roared back. After World War I and the 1918 flu pandemic, families were left grieving and desperate for answers, and spiritualism offered a lifeline. Talking to the dead wasn't fringe anymore. It was fashionable. Grief in a beaded gown, mainstream fact. Even Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, creator of the oh-so-rational Sherlock Holmes, was a devout spiritualist. He travelled the world defending seances and spirit photography photos allegedly showing ghostly figures or glowing auras. His friend Harry Houdini, on the other hand, made it his mission to debunk mediums and expose frauds. Historians still argue whether spiritualism was emotional healing or well-dressed deception. Tonight's host, Mrs. Pennington, adjusts her spectacles and taps the table. "Shall we begin?" she says, as if she's about to summon tea rather than the dearly departed. Everyone places a hand on the table. The room falls silent. The medium begins to hum a haunting little tune that sounds suspiciously like Camptown Races. A breeze drifts through the room, though all windows are closed. The planchette begins to move. Now for your quirky tidbit. Some séance group had house rules, including banning onions before sessions, so as not to cloud the spirit's senses, and requiring that shoes be removed to maintain psychic balance, because nothing channels the dead like cold ankles. The Ouija board spells S-A-M. Sam? Someone gasps. Could it be Cousin Sam? You wouldn't say the planchette is moving evenly, more like lurching around. You peek beneath the table. Yep, Timmy is pushing it. Timmy always pushes it. But no one says a word. It would break the mood, or the spell, or both. The conversation with Sam continues. I miss the apple pies. Everyone tears up. Except Grandma, who mutters, Sam hated apples. She's ignored. Suddenly, the candle flickers. The cat knocks something over. A child screams. The planchette flies off the board. Chaos. A ghost. Or possibly just gravity. And yet, the moment feels real. Emotional. Charged. The living and the dead, connected by imagination and candlelight. Some nights, the group uses spirit photography. Out comes a bulky camera with a long flash tube and a black cloth draped over the back. The resulting photo shows a faint blur in the corner. It's Uncle Reggie, someone says, despite it clearly being a smudge on the lens. Historians note that séances were particularly popular with women, especially those in mourning or socially sidelined. These gatherings offered something beyond tea and gossip. They offered power, a sense of control, and the thrill of possibly knowing something others didn't. Spiritualism wasn't just ghost talk. It included palm readings, tea leaf readings, crystal balls, automatic writing, and yes, even table tipping. That's when participants lightly touch a table, ask questions, and wait for the furniture to shake. Tonight, your table's too sturdy. Someone just kicks it and hopes no one notices. Fringe detail? Some communities held public séances on stage, with tickets. A medium would call out names and deliver messages from the other side in front of hundreds. Audiences gasped. Skeptics scoffed. But every so often, a detail would be just right, and the whole room would freeze. Back in your candlelit room, the séance is winding down. Mrs. Pennington dabs her forehead with a lavender-scented handkerchief. They've gone, she whispers. Back to the veil. Someone claps softly. Another yawns. A few start gathering coats. As you step out into the night, the chill makes your skin prickle. The stars are out, and the moon is high. You don't really believe what just happened, do you? But then again, why not? In a world spinning faster than ever in cars, in radios, in roaring music, maybe the dead would want to say hello once in a while. Maybe they just wanted one last slice of pie, or a reason to be remembered. And as your footsteps crunch softly down the walk, you glance back once, just in case someone or something is watching. Just in case. You're standing perfectly still, one eye closed, the other peering through a small rectangular box. The shutter clicks. You've just captured a moment that will take a week to develop and probably come out blurry. But you don't care because you're part of the Kodak craze, and America is falling head over heels for photography. In the 1922nd, cameras are no longer the sole playthings of wealthy hobbyists or professional portrait artists. They're going mainstream, baby. And everyone from teenage girls at the beach to uncles on vacation wants to take their own snapshots of life in motion. You lower your Kodak Brownie camera and crank the winding knob with a satisfying little whir. It's made of metal and faux leather, fits in both hands, and makes you feel like an artist. Or at least someone worth posing for. Mainstream fact. George Eastman's Kodak company made photography wildly accessible in the 1922nd by producing cameras that were affordable, portable, and most importantly, easy. Their slogan, "You press the button, we do the rest." A promise that rang true for millions of amateurs eager to freeze their world in rectangles. Today, you're at the park, and everyone's posing. Your friend Sally stands in front of a tree, hands on hips, head tilted just slightly, a pose she practiced in the mirror. Your cousin pretends to climb a tree, grinning like he's in a silent movie. Your little brother tries to photobomb before photobombing is a thing, sticking his tongue out behind a picnic basket. Snap, snap, snap. You'll send the roll off for developing later, maybe even splurge on glossy finish. The pictures will arrive in a neat envelope, along with instructions not to touch them with peanut butter fingers, which is never respected. Quirky tidbit. Kodak offered photo etiquette pamphlets, warning users not to photograph people without permission, not to take scandalous beach snaps, and, oddly, not to photograph cheese, as it tended to develop oddly. Cheese apparently was not camera ready. You flip through a small black photo album, cloth-bound, corners worn, and see your life in sepia. Here's you at the county fair, holding a pie ribbon. There's Mom, blurry but elegant, pouring lemonade on the porch. And there your friend Elsie, caught mid-sneeze, eternally preserved in comedic glory. Some families treat these albums like sacred texts. They label everything. The 12th of June, George ruins his suspenders. Aunt Millie's haircut, never again. Our car before Harold hit the milk wagon. Historians still argue whether the rise of amateur photography democratized memory or simply created a flood of poorly composed snapshots no one really wanted. But either way, it changed how people saw the world and how they saw themselves. Photos weren't just for milestones anymore. They were for everything. Breakfast on the porch, a snowman in the front yard, a particularly flattering angle of your dog looking wistful. You could photograph joy, grief, a single silly moment that might otherwise slip away like a breeze. Fringe detail. Some people created photo plays, basically DIY picture stories, using posed photos and handwritten captions to create little soap operas in an album. Mrs. Penelope suspects foul play, but what's in the pantry? Think Instagram stories, but slower, and possibly with more mustaches. And then there were the photo booths. You duck into one at the local drugstore, just a little curtained box with a mirror and a coin slot. Inside, it smells like cold metal and gum. You press the button. A flash blinds you. 10 seconds later, a strip of 4 images slides out, each one slightly worse than the last. You look sleepy, surprised, smug, and then confused. Perfect. You tuck it into your pocket like a secret. Maybe you'll paste it into your journal. Or slip it to someone cute with a note. Frame this. Or don't. But remember me smiling. Back at home, you pin your favorite shot to the wall. It curls slightly at the edges. It makes you grin every time you see it. Because photos aren't about perfection. They're about pause. Proof. They say, I was here. This mattered. Even if just for a second. And as you close your photo album, fingers tracing the ridged spine, you feel a quiet reverence. You haven't just taken pictures. You've built a time machine. One shutter click at a time. You hear it before you see it, 4 voices rising in perfect harmony, cutting through the summer air like butter on a hot biscuit. A warm tenor, a sturdy bass, and 2 bright baritones blend together in a sound so wholesome, it could probably fix a leaky roof. Welcome to the charming world of barbershop quartets and amateur music nights, where singing wasn't about fame, it was about fun, friends, and the occasional flat note. You follow the music to a gazebo in the town square. It's striped in red and white, strung with lanterns, and surrounded by folding chairs filled with people fanning themselves with church bulletins and paper programs. A lemonade stand operates in the background. Fireflies swirl lazily over the grass. Someone coughs on beat. Up on stage, the quartet is dressed like a vintage candy store. Straw boaters, striped vests, shiny shoes, and enough pomade to start a small oil fire. They sway as they sing. Sweet Adeline, the crowd hums along. Someone wipes a tear. You smile. Mainstream fact: barbershop quartets weren't just a quirky fad. In the 1922nd, they were everywhere in churches, schools, fire halls, even barbershops, hence the name obviously. Harmony singing was seen as both entertainment and moral virtue, an activity that built community, taught discipline, and made your neighbors like you more. You glance around. Some are mouthing the words. Others tap their toes. A small child mimics the singers from the front row. There's no microphone, no spotlight, just voices, air, and heart. Then comes the audience participation round. A songbook is passed around, pages dog-eared and coffee-stained. You find your spot. Down by the old mill stream. You don't know half the words, neither does anyone else, but you all sing anyway. Loud, off-key, glorious. Now here's your quirky tidbit. Some small towns had harmony contests where quartets would perform in front of local judges, often the town librarian, the mayor's wife, and a guy who once studied piano for 6 months. Prizes ranged from ribbons to pies, rivalries got intense, friendships were tested. A few choruses even dissolved mid-rehearsal over an argument about which doo-wop was too aggressive. After the quartet finishes, the piano is rolled out from someone's porch. It's chipped, slightly out of tune, and perfect. You watch as neighbors take turns performing no pressure, no stage fright, just joy. One woman plays a waltz. A teenage boy belts out a song from a Tin Pan Alley sheet his uncle gave him. A pair of sisters sing a duet they wrote themselves about a tomato that fell in love with a cucumber. It's oddly romantic. You sit back and soak it all in. This was the original talent show. No voting, no golden buzzers. Just a community gathering under the stars to say, let's share what we've got. Historians still argue whether amateur music nights helped preserve folk traditions or simply provided distraction from the uncertainties of modern life. But one thing's undeniable. They gave people a chance to perform, connect, and be seen without having to be perfect. You wander over to the snack table and grab a ginger cookie. Nearby, 2 older men argue over whether their 1917 quartet was better than today's kids. We had blend, Harold, not like these yodelers. You love every word of it. Fringe detail? Some barbershop quartets created their own business cards and had full-on booking schedules. They'd sing at weddings, fairs, and even funerals. Yes, funeral quartets. There was a demand, and those harmonies could soothe just about anything, even grief. The final act of the night is a sing-along version of Let Me Call You Sweetheart. The whole crowd joins in, arms linked, voices cracking, kids yawning. It's so tender, it almost feels scripted. You walk home slowly afterward, the melody still looping in your ears. Somewhere behind you, the quartet keeps harmonizing, not ready to let go of the night. There's something profoundly healing about group singing. It's not just about pitch, it's about belonging. You lend your voice, others lend theirs, and together you build something you couldn't create alone. So when you finally climb into bed, your ears still ringing faintly with 4-part harmony, you smile. Not because it was flawless, but because it was shared. You sink into a padded chair, the scent of talcum powder, hot towels, and faint floral perfume wafting around you. Overhead, a ceiling fan creaks rhythmically. You're not in a church or a parlor or even your own home. You're at the local barbershop or beauty salon, depending on your preference, where gossip travels faster than scissors, and everyone leaves feeling a little more like themselves. It's Saturday morning. The place is packed. A man is reading the newspaper while his beard is slowly shaved away. Across the room, 2 ladies argue over which Hollywood starlet wore fringe better. You glance at the row of hairdryers humming like lazy wasps, while a bottle of tonic promises more hair in less time or your dime back. This is the 1922nd, and self-care is in. Mainstream fact. The 1922nd saw a massive boom in personal grooming industries. Barbershops weren't just for haircuts. They were social hubs, political roundtables, therapy sessions. Likewise, beauty salons gave women the rare chance to sit, be pampered, and talk freely, sometimes about lipstick, sometimes about revolution. You settle in and catch the eye of the barber, Mr. Clayton, who nods like a priest hearing confession. "The usual?" he asks. You nod. He nods back. This is a sacred ritual. He drapes a crisp cloth over your shoulders and adjusts the chair angle. It squeaks. He hums softly as he sharpens a straight razor on a leather strop. You close your eyes and breathe in that sharp, clean scent, like aftershave and peppermint. Meanwhile, the conversations whirl like clippings on the floor. "Did you hear about Mabel's nephew ran off with a dance instructor from Cincinnati? I told her that perm would never last through humidity. Calvin Coolidge just doesn't look like he enjoys soup, you know?" This isn't idle chatter. It's community maintenance. You learn who's marrying whom, who's selling a goat, and which bakery started using margarine. Scandal. On the other side of town, in the beauty parlor, things are no less lively. A woman is under a dome hairdryer that looks like something from a science fiction novel. She's flipping through Ladies' Home Journal while her friend, lipstick half applied, launches into a passionate defense of rouge over powder. Fringe detail. One popular 1922nd treatment was the Marcel wave, a hairstyle involving heated tongs that produced uniform, glossy waves. Women sat through hours of sizzling hair, the room full of chemical smells and nervous laughter, all for a look that said, "I'm going out tonight and I will cause a stir." Meanwhile, barbers were offering tonic massages, scalp treatments that promised to revitalize follicles and refresh the soul. Most of them involved firm finger tapping, mysterious liquids, and the occasional slap to the head. Apparently, it worked, or at least people kept coming back. You glance in the mirror. Your face is half lathered in white foam. Behind you, a child is getting their first haircut, sitting rigidly while their mother coos, "You're doing so well, sweetie," even though the kid looks like they're about to faint. A man snoozes in the corner, head tilted, still waiting his turn. Historians still argue whether barbershops and salons were truly democratic spaces or simply mirrors of existing social norms. Were they havens for open dialogue, or just places where the loudest voices always won? Well, today, it's both. You get the straight razor treatment, the gentle swipe, the practiced confidence of someone who's done this 1,000 times. Then comes the aftershave. It burns like betrayal and smells like citrus victory. In the beauty parlor, the ladies are trying on new lipstick shades, plum punch, evening rose, and one questionably named tombstone red. A woman gasps. "It's perfect," she says. The others agree. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some salons had secret back rooms where women discussed politics, shared birth control advice, and even ran quiet suffragette circles in earlier decades. Under the cover of curlers and clippers, change was being planned. Back in your chair, the haircut's done. "Mister." Clayton brushes you off with a flourish. "You look 10 years younger," he says. You chuckle. You feel cleaner, sharper, seen. You tip your hat to the room figuratively and literally, and step outside into the sunlight. The wind tousles your freshly cut hair. You imagine it holding. It won't. But the confidence? That lingers. Because in the 1922nd, the barbershop and the beauty salon weren't just about vanity. They were about restoration. Not just of hairlines and eyeliner, but of dignity, connection, and self-worth. You walk down the street a little taller, passing others freshly trimmed, curled, powdered, and polished. And for a moment, you can't help but think, everyone looks ready for something wonderful. Your neck cranes skyward, hand shielding your eyes from the sun, heart thudding as a biplane barrels through the clouds like a paper kite with a death wish. Welcome to the high-flying, gasp-inducing spectacle of airshows, daredevils, and barnstormers where danger is entertainment and gravity is merely a suggestion. The year is 1925, and you're standing in a dusty farmer's field that has been temporarily transformed into a runway, performance arena, and daredevil playground. A hand-painted sign reads, Wings of glory, one day only. There are no bleachers, just hay bales, wagons, and a patch of scorched grass roped off with optimism. A crowd gathers, clutching lemonade and parasols, watching a speck in the sky grow larger, louder, faster. You hear it before you truly see it, the throaty rumble of an engine built mostly of canvas, wire, and sheer nerve. The plane loops once, twice, then dives dramatically toward the crowd, before pulling up just in time. You definitely flinched. So did your grandpa. Mainstream fact. In the 1922nd, barnstorming became one of the most exhilarating and frankly insane forms of popular entertainment. Former WWI pilots, many of them jobless but thrill-hungry, took to the skies in surplus biplanes, performing stunts across rural America for pennies and pie. They'd land in empty fields, advertise with handbills and word of mouth, and put on shows that made people forget how recently they'd almost died in a war. And the stunts? Unbelievable. A man walks the wing of a plane as it loops. A woman, hairpin tight, climbs out onto the landing gear mid-flight. A parachutist leaps, only to deploy his chute mere seconds before hitting the hay. The crowd roars. Your neighbor mutters, "They'll kill themselves one day." Then shouts, "Do the dive again." Here's your quirky tidbit. Some barnstormers made extra money by offering $5 thrill rides to brave audience members. You'd climb into the open cockpit, no seatbelt, no helmet, and scream yourself hoarse while the pilot did barrel rolls over your own house. Many riders threw up. Few regretted it. Back on the ground, vendors hawk souvenir photos and stale popcorn. A kid balances on a fence, eyes wide. A man in overalls boasts, "If I were 20 years younger, I'd be up there doing loops too." His wife snorts. Historians still argue whether barnstorming was a noble celebration of flight or an unsustainable stunt-fueled death lottery. But there's no denying its role in making aviation real to everyday Americans. Before airlines, before airports, before security lines and reclining seats, there was this. A single prop plane buzzing over a cornfield, thrilling people who had never even left their state. Next, the announcer's voice booms through a tinny megaphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in this county, the flying automobile." You turn and see what looks like a jalopy with wings. It bumps down a dirt path, lifts 2 feet off the ground, then immediately settles back down. The crowd claps anyway. It's the future, apparently. Fringe detail? Some barnstorming shows included aerial duels, fake dogfights complete with prop guns, smoke trails, and over-the-top commentary. In one Ohio show, 2 pilots staged a mock mid-air argument with banners that read, "You stole my girl, and she likes flying better." As the final stunt begins, a man climbs a rope ladder, hanging from a plane in flight. He waves. You scream. Someone faints. He hangs there for a full 30 seconds, before dropping dramatically into a haystack the size of a small house. The crowd goes wild. You can't feel your face from smiling. After the show, you walk over to one of the planes. It's patched with canvas and duct tape. The pilot leans against the wing, smoking a cigarette with a grin that says he knows exactly how cool he is. You ask how long he's been flying. He shrugs. Since Tuesday. You buy a postcard from a girl sitting on a crate, an image of a man standing on a plane wing, arms outstretched, wind in his hair, captioned, "Fear is grounded." You think it might be the most poetic thing you've ever seen printed next to a chili dog stand. The sun dips low, and the sky turns pink. The planes line up to leave. One by one, they lift into the air, fading specks with engines that sound like 1,000 angry lawnmowers. You wave goodbye to a woman in goggles who salutes from the cockpit before vanishing over the treetops. You exhale. Not everyone will remember the names of the pilots, but they'll remember how they felt, hearts pounding, hands clapping, dreams stretched skyward. Because in the 1922nd, flying wasn't about miles or destinations. It was about daring the sky to blink first. The wood beneath your skates creaks slightly. You wobble once, twice, and then glide forward with just enough grace to feel like a superstar. A jazz tune plays faintly over the gramophone in the corner, mixing with the rhythmic clatter of wheels on polished floor. Welcome to your evening escape. Roller skating, bowling, and indoor fun where the weather doesn't matter and dignity is strictly optional. It's a rainy Thursday, but nobody's staying home. You've come to the local roller rink, a long, narrow building that smells like waxed pine, popcorn, and maybe fear. Overhead, string lights flicker like they're trying to keep up with the music. Kids zigzag past you with alarming confidence. You, on the other hand, cling to the wall like it owes you money. Still, you're smiling. Mainstream fact. During the 1922nd, indoor leisure activities took off in a big way. As cities grew and leisure time became more common, Americans flocked to roller rinks, bowling alleys, arcades, and gymnasiums to stay entertained, and maybe show off a little. It was active fun, but it didn't require fresh air or, thankfully, talent. You take a few more cautious laps around the rink. Somewhere behind you, someone falls with a loud thud and yells, "I'm good!" Another person glides backward flawlessly while twirling a string of licorice. Show off. Here's your quirky tidbit. Many rinks in the 1922nd employed a live band perched in a small loft above the rink. The tempo of the music would dictate the speed of the skaters. Slower waltzes meant graceful gliding, while upbeat ragtime turned the floor into pure chaos. One popular tune? Yes, We Have No Bananas. Seriously, after skating, and several minor bruises, you head across the street to the bowling alley, a smoky, echoey den of clattering pins and bad form. Men in shirt sleeves line up along the wooden lanes. A chalkboard lists team names: the Alley Cats, Gutter Punks, Pin Pals. You rent a pair of suspiciously sticky shoes, grab a ball that's slightly too heavy, and take your stance. One deep breath. You swing. Release. The ball thunks onto the lane, veers dramatically left, and takes out exactly one pin. It wobbles, falls. You cheer like you just cured polio. Historians still debate whether bowling was a working-class hobby or a budding middle-class obsession. Either way, it brought people together: church leagues, factory teams, family tournaments. It was part sport, part social experiment, and always an excuse to eat pickles and drink soda while laughing at your uncle's form. Fringe detail? Some 1922nd bowling alleys doubled as speakeasies. The back room held reserved leagues, who mysteriously bowled with no pins, no balls, and very strong lemonade. Police sometimes raided alleys mid-frame, sending patrons scurrying like pins on a strike. Your team cheers as you manage a spare okay. It was mostly luck, but let's not get technical. Someone slides you a root beer float. Someone else challenges you to a dance-off on lane 7. You decline, but promise to clap enthusiastically. Next up, table games. A row of billiard tables stretches along the far wall. The room is dim, smoky, and utterly theatrical. Cue sticks line the wall. One man chalks his with a slow precision, usually reserved for military operations. In the corner, two women lean over the felt, laughing between shots and talking about a neighbor who just up and left with a traveling hat salesman. You play a round. You lose terribly. You pretend it was intentional. The hours melt away. You shoot pool. You bowl. You roller skate poorly but with spirit. The rain outside drums on the roof, but no one notices anymore. You're here, warm, dry, happy, maybe a little sweaty. And that's the thing about indoor fun in the 1922nd. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't headline grabbing, but it was gathering, movement, noise. It gave people space to unwind and play without needing a ballroom or a brass band. As the night ends, you take one last slow lap around the rink, holding onto the rail less, and your own balance more. The music fades, the lights dim. Someone sweeps stray popcorn into a corner. You trade your shoes back, your skates back, your dignity well, that stays behind until next Thursday. And as you step outside into the misty street, your legs still wobbling, you realize something. It wasn't about winning, or being good, or staying upright. It was about showing up, letting go, and rolling with it literally. The stairs creak beneath your feet, the smell of chalk and coffee wafting down the hallway. You duck just in time to avoid a flying sock, only to have a pie tin whiz past your shoulder. Don't worry, you're not under siege. You've just walked into the loud, chaotic, sleep-deprived world of college life and fraternity hijinks in the roaring 20s. This isn't the polished university tour of the modern age. No pristine dorm lounges or glossy brochures. Instead, you're stepping into a whirlwind of debate clubs, dusty lecture halls, endless pranks, and more student newspapers than anyone has time to read. You're on campus now. The quad is a mix of ambition and hangovers. Students lounge under trees reading poetry, likely for class, possibly for heartbreak. Others rush past with armfuls of books, waving at professors with a mix of fear and flattery. Mainstream fact: the 1922nd saw college enrollment in the US double thanks to economic growth, improved access, and the rise of liberal arts education. More young people, especially women, entered universities, not just to become teachers or secretaries, but to learn, to grow, to start fresh. And yes, to party. You hear laughter from the nearby fraternity house, a slightly tilting Victorian building that smells like varnish, burnt toast, and trouble. Inside, someone's walking on stilts, for reasons no one can quite explain. Another guy is asleep in the bathtub with a ukulele on his chest. Above the fireplace is a poorly stuffed badger named Dean Chusalot. Welcome to Greek life, 1922nd style. Fraternities and sororities were everywhere, and while they touted character, scholarship, and philanthropy, they were also hubs for wild traditions. The pledge process could involve singing embarrassing songs in public, painting one's face like a tomato, or delivering a pie to the dean while dressed as a goose. Don't ask, just deliver. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some colleges held mock trials, where students acted as lawyers, judges, and criminals trying classmates for ridiculous crimes like most dramatic feint in lit class, or improper use of semicolons. Punishments included writing sonnets in iambic pentameter or scrubbing the quad fountain with a semicolons. Toothbrush. Meanwhile, in the lecture halls, you sit through a rousing philosophy class taught by a professor with wild hair and shoes that squeak. He quotes Plato. Someone in the back mutters, "I liked Aristotle's early work better." You scribble notes you may never reread, but feel smarter just writing them. Historians still argue whether the explosion of college life in the 22nd created a new American intellectual class or simply gave young people a prolonged adolescence before the realities of work and marriage. Maybe it was both, because even the scholars needed to blow off steam. Which brings us to college dances. You attend one in the gymnasium, where crepe paper streamers dangle from basketball hoops and a live band squeezes into the corner. There's Punch, there's Charleston. There's at least one guy in spats trying to impress a co-ed by reciting Keats between songs. He fails, but politely. You're handed a dance card, a small booklet listing the evening songs, where you can pencil in partners. It's a formal tradition that no one strictly follows, but everyone carries around for appearances. You dance anyway, poorly, gloriously. Fringe detail? Some colleges issued behavior guides for dances. No excessive swaying, no holding hands for longer than 5 seconds, and absolutely no fox trotting after 10 p.m, because clearly that's when the trouble starts. You swing by the library later, thinking it'll be quiet, and find a chess tournament, a secret poetry reading, and a very intense argument about whether the moon influences essay deadlines. It does. Emotionally, at least. In the women's dormitory, there's a whispered debate about The Great Gatsby, just published the year before. One girl thinks Daisy is misunderstood. Another says Nick is clearly the worst. A third just wants to talk about the green light and whether it's a metaphor or a traffic signal. No one wins, but everyone feels heard. You walk the campus as night settles in. Light flickers from dorm windows. Somewhere, a clarinet plays softly out of tune. A couple kisses behind the library, feet crunching on autumn leaves. 2 students read Latin under a lamplight. One is snoring. And in all this chaos, curiosity, noise, and nuance, you realize what college life really offered in the 1922nd. Possibility. The chance to learn, to fail, to argue passionately about things that don't matter, so that, someday, you can do the same with things that do. It was training ground for adults in progress. You stop outside the old science building where someone's hung a sign that reads, "Don't panic, it's just finals." You laugh. Because if there's one truth about college in any era, it's this. You never quite know what you're doing. And that's exactly the point. You're rolling up your sleeves, squinting at a confusing set of instructions and wondering why you thought easy wallpapering was a real thing. Welcome to the stubbornly optimistic world of home improvements and DIY fads in the 1922nd, where Americans turned their homes into projects, their garages into laboratories, and their patients into wallpaper paste. It's Saturday, and the smell of paint thinner and linseed oil floats through your modest bungalow. The furniture's been pushed into the center of the room, covered in sheets. You're holding a brush in one hand and a color sample called Eggshell Ambition in the other. Let the improvement begin. Mainstream fact. With the rise of the middle class and the post-war boom, 1922nd homeowners became obsessed with domestic refinement. Magazines like Better Homes and Gardens offered endless advice: how to paint trim with precision, how to tile a bathroom without crying, and how to keep your linoleum shining like a conscience. You crouch to measure a section of baseboard. Your spouse holds a level. The cat sits inside the toolbox, offering no assistance. You hammer a nail. It bends immediately. You hammer another. Success. Sort of. And you're not alone. Across America, families are painting, papering, rearranging furniture based on scientific home flow, and, in some cases, attempting home electrification despite having no formal training and only mild fear of electrocution. Here's your quirky tidbit. One popular DIY booklet in 1924 was titled "You, Too, Can Rewire Your Attic," and came with illustrations so vague that many readers accidentally cross-wired their light switches to the doorbell. Every time someone opened the linen closet, ding dong. You take a break and flip through a copy of Ladies' Home Journal, where this month's features include 10 ways to paint your pantry with personality, how to properly display doilies for maximum impact. Does your husband's shed reflect his inner gentleman? Yes, even sheds were under scrutiny. Meanwhile, your neighbor Harold is building a sunroom entirely from scrap windows he found behind the train station. He claims it will be a greenhouse for his soul. You nod politely and pretend you don't see the load-bearing wall sagging slightly. Across the street, Mrs. Kennedy is installing a breakfast nook. She's used 3 different stencils to decorate it with flowers, birds, and what may be a very anxious-looking squirrel. It adds character, she insists. You return to your own wallpaper. It's curling at the corners. The paste is on your shirt. The pattern doesn't line up. You say a word that your grandmother would pretend not to hear. But you press on. Historians still argue whether the DIY trend was a reflection of independence or just a symptom of too many magazines. Was it personal expression or just keeping up with the neighbors? But everyone agrees. The 1922nd marked a turning point in home as identity. No longer just shelter, your home now had a personality. And that personality required elbow grease. You step outside for some fresh air, wiping paste from your eyebrow, and notice other signs of improvement blooming like gardenias. A new white picket fence, slightly crooked. A homemade bird bath constructed from an old washtub and cement. A man attempting to mow his lawn using scissors because his mower makes the dog nervous. Fringe detail? There was an actual radio program called Home Fixer's Hour, broadcast from Pittsburgh starting in 1928, in which a soft-voiced man named Arthur explained how to properly refinish a dresser while listeners mailed in questions like, "Is it okay to paint over termites?" Later that afternoon, you attempt your first built-in bookshelf using scrap wood, nails, and eternal optimism. The result leans gently to the left like it's had a long day, but when you place a few paperbacks on it and step back, it's not bad. Wobbly, whimsical, but yours. Evening falls. The wallpaper still isn't perfect. The paint has dried slightly uneven. Your back aches. But there's a strange satisfaction in it all, a quiet pride. You didn't hire anyone. You didn't wait for someone else. You did it yourself. You put on a kettle, sit at your now glossy kitchen table, watch as a breeze flutters the new lace curtain you installed with 2 thumbtacks and hope. You flip through a catalogue for your next project. Maybe a breakfast hutch. Maybe a rain barrel. Maybe a nap. Because that's the secret to 1922nd DIY. It wasn't about perfection. It was about progress. about making the space around you reflect the life you were building, one crooked nail and mismatched curtain at a time. You're flipping through a thick, crinkly catalogue now, your fingers pausing over glossy black and white images of things you didn't even know you wanted. A mahogany bookshelf, a new dress in radio blue, a collapsible bathtub. And is that a mail-order chicken coop? Yes. Yes, it is. Welcome to the wonderful world of catalogue shopping in the 1922nd, where consumer dreams arrived not by app or algorithm, but in the form of ink, staples, and 400-plus pages of possibility. You're curled up on the divan, catalogues spread out like a map to some mythical retail kingdom. The words Sears, Roebuck, and Company stare up at you from the cover like an invitation to a secret society of ordering stuff while wearing house slippers. Mainstream fact: by the 1922nd, mail-order catalogues were thriving. Sears, Montgomery Ward, and others sent out millions of catalogues each year, allowing Americans from big cities to remote farms to buy almost anything: clothes, tools, furniture, bicycles, medicine, even entire houses from the comfort of their own front porches. Yes, you read that right. Entire houses. You pause on a page with floor plans. For $2,354, shipping not included, you can get a kit house, pre-cut boards, nails, and instructions delivered by rail, ready to be assembled by you and any neighbors you haven't annoyed recently. It even includes a porch swing, because of course it does. Here's your quirky tidbit. Sears sold more than 70,000 prefab homes through their catalogues between 1908 and 1940. Some of these houses are still standing today. People literally ordered homes like they were ordering waffles. Back on your couch, you circle a phonograph with a dog painted on the speaker. You need it, obviously. Even though you don't own many records, or a dog. Across the room, your brother is browsing the toy section: marbles, cap guns, metal trucks, something called a hoop and stick that looks confusing and slightly dangerous. He wants the chemistry set, even though he nearly blew up the shed last summer with vinegar and determination. Your mother is in the appliances section, eyeing a new butter churner that promises less fatigue, more flavor. Your father, naturally, is reading the tool section like it's an adventure novel. He circles a hand drill, a saw, and a wrench that claims it can solve 99% of home problems. Bold. Then, someone flips to the clothing pages, and suddenly you're all critics. That hemline is too short. That hat looks like a cake. Why does that man have a belt and suspenders? Pick a struggle. It's part catalogue, part comedy show. You're not just shopping, you're dreaming, making plans, asserting opinions no one asked for. Historians still argue whether catalogue culture was empowering or overwhelming. Did it offer freedom of choice or just fuel unnecessary wants? But most agree. It democratized access. Rural families could order the same tableware as city elites. A farm kid in Kansas could get the same saddle shoes as a prep schooler in Boston. And the joy of mail order? It was delayed gratification at its finest. You'd place your order via postcard or through the local general store. Then, you'd wait, and wait, and wait. Weeks later, a crate would arrive, sometimes by horse cart, sometimes by train, sometimes carried by a postman with arms full of dreams. Fringe detail? Some catalogues included payment plans, letting buyers pay by the month for big-ticket items. This was a game-changer for lower-income families, though it also started the long, complicated relationship between America and consumer credit. You can almost hear the sound of wallets bracing themselves. Back at home, someone circled a waffle iron, a mail-order violin, and what appears to be a collapsible canoe. No one in your family plays violin. No one has ever canoed. But you keep flipping, because it's not really about what you'll buy. It's about what you could buy. It's about creating a version of life that's just one order form away. A better swept porch, a brighter dress, a lawnmower with guaranteed gear teeth. Whatever those are. Even if you don't send in the order, you fold the page carefully, just in case. And as the fire dies down, and the catalogue gets passed around one last time, you realize you've spent the evening not just shopping, but imagining, hoping, and maybe believing just a little, that a different kind of life can be delivered. You're walking slowly now, hands in your pockets, your shoes softly crunching the gravel of a quiet lane just past sundown. The air smells of lilacs and something faintly sweet, maybe pipe smoke, maybe honeysuckle. It's peaceful, still, and this time, the thrill isn't a jazz band or a pie contest or a wing walker doing flips in a biplane. It's just moonlight and the chance to be alone or alone together in a world that's finally quiet. In the 1922nd, after the parties and the porch swings, the lectures and the lemonade stands, there were the evenings. Long, wandering, restful strolls that didn't require an invitation, a reason, or even a destination. You'd simply go, maybe with a friend, maybe with someone you hoped would hold your hand, or maybe with no one at all. Mainstream fact. While the Roaring Twenties are remembered for their volume jazz, cars, industrial boom life also slowed down when the sun dipped. Evening strolls, particularly on weekends, were so common they were often referred to as taking the air. It was health advice. It was romance. It was ritual. Tonight, you're passing lamplight windows where lace curtains flutter and radios murmur soft music. You hear faint laughter behind one screen door, the click of a typewriter from another. A cat slinks across your path and disappears into a hedge like a secret. The street is lined with lilac bushes, white picket fences, and porch steps that creak when leaned on just right. A couple walks ahead of you, their voices low, their arms swinging in rhythm. No urgency, no performance, just two people sharing oxygen. You pause by a neighbor's yard and spot an elderly man sitting on a rocking chair. He nods. You nod. That's the entire conversation. It says everything. Quirky tidbit. Some towns had quiet hours, posted in public squares, times between 8 and 10 p.m., where residents were encouraged not to play instruments, slam doors, or shout. The idea was to create space for these twilight rituals, reflecting, winding down, and maybe whispering dreams into the dark. You stop by a bench near a park fountain. It gurgles softly, like a lullaby for the grass. Fireflies blink lazily in the trees. Your shoes dangle from your toes. You exhale deeply, the kind of breath that doesn't come from dancing or laughing, but from simply being still. Historians still debate whether these quiet nighttime walks were an extension of Victorian manners or an emotional necessity in a rapidly accelerating world. But no one denies their power. Walking at night safely, gently, without rush, was a way of checking back in, with your thoughts, with your street, with your small corner of the world. Fringe detail? Some people believed moonlight walks improved digestion. Others said they encouraged clarity of thought and marital harmony. A few particularly poetic souls called them midnight baptisms. You like that one best. You pass the post office. It's closed, of course. But someone's left a flower tucked into the door handle. No note, just the gesture. You continue walking. A dog barks once, then curls up under a tree. Someone hums a lullaby. The street narrows. The moon rises higher. You don't feel tired, but your thoughts begin to soften. And as you reach your front gate, you stop and look back. The street is nearly empty. The world is tucking itself in. And maybe that's the real heart of 1922nd leisure. Not the noise, not the spectacle, but the quiet after. The moonlit strolls. The final song from a distant radio. The porch light left on just a little longer than necessary. It wasn't all roaring. Some of it was whispering. Now, take a long, slow breath. Let the image of that quiet street linger. The soft shuffle of your shoes. The rhythm of distant crickets. The way the lamplight glowed like candle wax on the sidewalks. There's no rush now, no spotlight, no crowd. Just the feel of the cool night air brushing your cheeks, the weight of the day lifting ever so slightly with each step. Maybe you hear the low buzz of a porch light, the flutter of a curtain. Maybe, even now, you can hear your own breath steady, slow, unbothered. Let your muscles loosen. Unclench your jaw. Let your shoulders drop with the same ease as twilight falling across a field. This was the rhythm that life allowed back then. A chance to be quiet without guilt, to sit without agenda, to do nothing and let that be enough. Maybe you're still sitting on that bench. Maybe you've wandered into your yard, grass cool beneath your feet. Maybe you've returned to the porch swing, the one that creaks when you shift, but always settles back into balance. Wherever you are now in your imagination, in your bed, in your breath, know that this stillness belongs to you. You've walked through a world of music and mayhem, porch gossip and paper moons, laughter and wallpaper glue. But now, everything is still. And in that stillness, in that hush between heartbeats, the past becomes something warm, something familiar, something you can carry softly into your sleep.